It's 20 days to Nigeria's election. This election is going to be a decider for the kind of Nigeria we want moving forward. The big question is, what are the issues that matter in this election? To discuss this with me, I have a policy analyst, Adeniyi Kunu. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Sincere gratitude for inviting me to start with. I think what you got yourself caught up in has to be pushed to the governor of Lagos State, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, because I've raised it as a very important issue on many platforms that I've been, even this afternoon, just returning from a broadcast, and I said that certain things cannot be left unanswered. The ascendancy of, I'm from Lagos, so the ascendancy of touts as representatives of government is strange to me. I didn't come to live here. This is my ancestral home. And because we understand the evolution of the Lagos socio-cultural and political outlook, we are here to advise those that we have given the power to represent us to do the right thing. So Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has to speak to, because they become law unto themselves. There is no validity in what they do. We were not communicated to when they employed them.
Exactly.
And at times, you find it that it's very funny. They put stones on the sides of the road that vehicles which see them as lawless agents actually get pelted. Like last week, I was driving from Mile 2 towards, Alakija, and they broke a bus's glass because the guy felt, why are you stopping me for? This is my private property. So I think that Lagos appears to be in ascension of certain lawlessness that predecessors of Sanwo-Olu worked very hard to prevent from happening. And the escalation of violence in any society happens when you have this nature and kinds of things continue to happen. So Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, and I must say, we are sorry for what you experienced this morning. So really that is it. So when we talk about that, that's one part of the conversation. The elections are here.
Right.
According to history documented in every society, when elections are near, that is when the government tries as much as possible to do right, so that the power of incumbency could play in favor of the government seeking re-election, and those that do not hold election, elected office are also able, by their actions and inaction, communicate certain levels of capacity so that they can be voted into office.
Yeah, sorry to interject you.
It's okay, please.
With the point you just mentioned, I'm sure you're very familiar with the crisis in the APC, All Progressive Congress.
Yes, I am.
Some representatives of Ahmed Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has said that the incumbent is trying to make APC less sellable to Nigerians so that they can vote other parties deliberately. Yeah. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that he understands the internal workings of the party better than both of us. Being a party chieftain, the APC never existed without the stamp of approval of sanction of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So he understands the internal dynamics. And that position appears to have been consolidated by the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, who spoke less than a week ago about the actions of certain persons at the powerhouse called Aso Rock, which appears to be reducing the quality touted by the APC. And when two strong persons in a political party, a former governor, a current governor, and both have access to the current president, then you have to listen to them very carefully. I said before now that when an election is on its eve, the incumbents do everything possible not to make life miserable, so that people could begin to countenance it as a party that loves the people. But if you look at what the president has done, no matter what anybody says in support of the president, bad timing, processes are very key. The process of wanting to, for instance, change the Naira, perhaps not telling us why we suddenly start suffering from all the queues and scarcity of petrol, appears to be a product of not understanding the process that you're putting in place. So the process has been messed up. The process of changing the money in 100 days. Let Emefiele that has worked in Switzerland tell us the average duration where any country that has changed its currency has done that. When we talk about currency change, you have to accommodate the population, the number of people. But it's obvious now from what you said that it appears as if indeed, maybe by virtue of their action or inaction, the incumbent doesn't really want Asiwaju Tinubu to have a good game at the polls. It's becoming obvious by today.
Okay, we're going to sample the opinion of the director of IAGA Africa, joining us all the way from Abuja, Cynthia Mbamalo. Hello, Cynthia. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm sure you've been following the conversation, and what issues do you think we should focus on? There's so many things bedeviling us as Nigerians currently: the fuel scarcity, the new Naira note scarcity, and amongst many other issues. What other issues, or what issues do you think we should really be focusing on this election? Do you think it's also a deliberate attempt to sort of get people agitated so that they can declare a state of emergency, as some people might, opine? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think first, all the things we're experiencing now, it all borders on leadership, basically, the quality of leadership. Because if we have good, responsible and responsive leadership, it would also inform the kinds of policies that we see evolving out of government. But for me, if you want to ask me what is the paramount issue we should focus in this election, I think is who would be elected as our leaders, because if we cannot identify individuals with good leadership qualities who understand responsive leadership, we'll keep circling around these issues. And I'll just look at it from three dimensions. I think the first part, almost every elections, we have issues around fuel scarcity. Towards an elections, it's almost like every other issue escalates. So I'm not surprised to see what we're experiencing now. But it's unfortunate which is why I called descending around leadership. The first part is the failure of government to understand that leadership or governance itself must be divorced from politics. That when it comes to engagement towards an elections, what should be paramount should be the interest of the people, not politics. And I think all we've seen happening in this couple of days and even towards the election is just that every issue is politicized, and we forget that we need to look at issues from the point of the people. The second part for me is there are several issues to look at in these elections. But if you want to ask one of my top two, I think the first to be security, the second to be economy. And why do these go hand in hand? First, if we have a country where almost every part is bedeviled with one level of insecurity threat or the other, it affects the quality of life, it affects every other sector, and that in itself affects the level of development that any country can achieve. So if we cannot even deal with issues of security boldly, I don't know what else we'll be discussing about. So for me, security is it should be an important issue to be discussed. And the second is economy. And why do I put this hand in hand? Because these two issues are intertwined and they go together. So if you want to think around just the basic hardship that we experience with the fuel scarcity or even the scarcity of the Naira, this has security implications, because it also has a tendency to increase the level of crime. It also has a tendency to put people's lives at risk. And it also has a tendency to affect the quality of life. So at the end of it all, like what I said, why my first point was important, is that when we go towards elections, the government of the day most times forget that when it comes to engagement or governance itself, that governance must be separated from politics. And that the people, the country, ought to exist before, during, and after the elections. And at the moment, what we're seeing is politicizing of every issue. And the third, for me, honestly, is what yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. If I'm to be more direct with some of your points, right? You're saying that the government of the day should concentrate on how their policies would affect the people, as opposed to playing politics with this. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has assured Nigerians that the legacy that he wants to leave is a free and fair election. And some people are of the school of thought that the reason why they're trying to make sure that the new Naira notes goes into effect before the election is so that they can curb votes buying. So that in its sense, do you think is politics, or do you think is actually trying to deliver a free and fair election so that some candidates will not have undue advantage over other candidates because they might have stocked up on the old Naira notes somewhere?
Well, the truth is, when it comes to policy decisions, we must also engage it from a point of objectivity and not really from a point of sentiment. So let's play this out. Whether we face out the old Naira note or the new Naira note, the truth is we actually have existing laws that regulate campaign finance and how money politics, or rather how money is used in politics. So honestly, if we really wanted to see a legacy from the president, as a commander-in-chief of the armed forces and the chief executive, he's responsible for the control of respective state institutions with the power under the law to enforce campaign financing rules, number one, to even arrest and prosecute people who breach these laws. So let's not mix apples and tomatoes at this point. I think it's important we understand that yes, we have existing institutions to act. And sometimes we, as Nigerians, we act as if, no, our hands are tied behind our backs, like we don't know what to do. But if we have institutions acting, actually, the only way to curb impunity is to ensure compliance and enforcement of our rules. So that's one point. Yes, we don't understand the argument of, oh, perhaps this would help reduce votes buying, but let us also understand that we operate in a system of inequality, meaning that as we still have challenges of access to the Naira notes, that the generality of the public are still the major victims of this policy, meaning that they still have a class of person, because there's no guarantee that a select few in the political class do not have access to the Naira notes and are using it to their own advantage. So there are several theories out there that it could also be a means to limit access to funds for a category of parties or category of interest. So at this point in time, what I said is important to think about governance beyond politics is because for every economic decision, you must identify the several indicators that ensures its full, or rather its effectiveness and efficiency, meaning that you don't take decisions at spontaneous without first understanding its consequence on the populace, which is what we're seeing right now. So a decision is made. A date is fixed for the new Naira note to become operative, but you have situations where citizens are queuing. Those petty traders, the average Nigerian who lives on what he or she earns on a daily basis, who basically does a lot of cash transactions, very little of electronic transactions. Those individuals, at the end of the day, the farmer in the communities, if you think about those who are suffering the brunt of this policy the most, that is the majority of the people. So yes, I could understand the argument, but let's remember that for every argument, there's always a counter-argument out there, which is why I believe that for this engagement first, I do not believe they had sufficient stakeholders engagement. Remember that it's a policy that the Minister of Finance at some point felt like she was also not even informed before the policy was implemented. We operate within a government. There's a system, there's a constitution. People should not act in silos. It's a governance, it's not a one-man or two-person show. Which is why I believe that for every policy decision that must be taken, the people must be at the center of it.
All right. We have very limited time. So very quickly, INEC has reiterated their position that the elections must hold on the 25th of February. Do you think, with all the parameters in place, do you think we are ready for 25th of February?
According to the Constitution, the only thing that will make an election hold is insecurity at the level that disrupts civil peace, basically. And I've not seen that. And we've also said that perhaps this disruption has another reason why it's in place. I've told people that when this news started filtering around that they may not have the elections, I told people, be careful not to protest now. Protest when you go to vote with your decision. Because if you do anything right now, government will have reason to not want the elections to go ahead, because some people have said that some persons have different ideas about how Nigeria should still go. So I think that for me, and according to the rule books that guide INEC and the Constitution, INEC has to hold this election. And if these elections are not held, I tell you, it's going to disrupt all of this, but we don't need that now. Of course. So this election must hold. It
must hold. I agree with 100%. But finally, with the current situation of things, people are getting to their breaking point. You know, we've seen videos flying around, people fighting in banks, people fighting at the filling stations, just a lot of mini chaos happening.
If we found ourselves in Senate climbs, Emefiele should have resigned, President Muhammadu Buhari should have resigned. Resign because two key things. He is the one managing the petroleum sector as a substantive Minister of Petroleum Resources. Emefiele is an expert in banking and finance, but he has not advised his superior well. You want to change the money, yes, but you are doing it at a time that is not allowing people's life move right. So I think that in climes where people take responsibility for their action, Emefiele, for instance, and even President Muhammadu Buhari should have been apologizing, but I've not seen such apologies. But anyway, thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution, and thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Cynthia.
Thank you.